All right, so welcome everyone. Good morning. This chilly, can we say chilly? I think chilly is not appropriate. It's more than chilly. It's just very cold. Sunday morning. As before we start, I don't have any visuals, but I just would like to invite all of you to some of our next events. February 12, that is 2 weekends ahead. We're going to have another fundraising. We're going to take advantage of this cold, and we're going to have a day of soup. So we're going to bring a lot of soup, and we'll have a soup festival. And then we can get together and kind of take advantage of that now that we can do that. Second, 1 month after that, March 12, is our AGM. It's our general meeting where we're gonna tell you guys how we did in 2021 on the financial side of it, 2022 on the financial side of it, and tell you some of the activities that we plan to do in 2023. What we plan to do during the summer, what we plan to do with our kids' spiritual education, and other activities that we're planning. And third, you might have noticed we are not having any Monday night activities. So at this point, we are studying the best way, but we're going to reconvene and do it again once a month. For now, online. Still online. We're going to continue the Gospel according to Spiritism study. So the first Monday of every month, it's when we're going to get together at a different time at 8 p.m. instead of 7 through Zoom. But we're going to send all that information to you shortly. Yeah, so that's, I think, the top 3. Let's keep at 3. But we'll have more. We have been meeting and trying to figure out the best activities that we can do, things that we can come together, we can talk about the gospel, we can talk about Spiritism, and we can also talk and be together as a community. So stay tuned for more information. Text for today, because we're going to talk about forgiveness. I chose text 135. Title is Forgive Always, from the Living Spring. And the passage that Emmanuel enlightened us is, if you forgive other people's offenses, your heavenly Father will forgive yours. This is Jesus in Matthew chapter 6, verse 14. No matter how serious your neighbor's wrongs may seem to be, do not waste your time on criticism. Condemning strengthens the darkness and sets up barriers to serving the light. Regarding victims of evil, look for some good with which you may uplift them, just as life performs the miracle of making apparently dead trees green again. Before anything else, remember how difficult it is to judge people's decisions concerning experience that are different from our own. How can we reflect if we appropriate someone else's conscience? And how can we sense reality if we use a heart that does not belong to us? If the world around you cries out in alarm today, remain silent and wait. An appropriate remark is impractical when fog surrounds us. Tomorrow, when your equilibrium is restored, you will have enough light so that the darkness does not alter your understanding. Moreover, with regard to problems involving criticism, do not think you are beyond criticism yourself. Due to the noxious self-complacency, you do not notice how often you seem unkind towards others. If there are those who love our praiseworthy qualities, there are also those who point out our faults and defects. If there are those who help us praising our luminous future, there are also those who trouble us, forcing us to reveal the dark past. Therefore, practice goodness and forgive always. The good news teaches us that love covers a multitude of sins. Those who forgive, forgetting evil and leaving the good, receive from the Heavenly Father, in the sympathy and cooperation of their neighbor, the charter of self-liberation, making them capable of submission. Connected that we are through this text from our dear brother Emmanuel, let's raise our thoughts to God, raise our thoughts to Jesus, connect to the divine wisdom, to our guardian angels, to the entire spiritual team that guides us and guides all the work of this lovely second home that is FSS for us. And let's be grateful for one more time, one more opportunity that we have to be here to listen and understand a little bit more about Jesus' teachings and how those are so important for every one of us to continue with a little bit of more success in our moral evolution. Let's ask that we have another meeting, another blessed meeting, full of reflections, full of love, full of serenity, full of compassion. So be it. All right, so today we're going to talk about forgiveness. And my whole goal for today is just to uncover and just to improve a little bit of our knowledge and what Jesus has told us about forgiveness, what even scientists have been telling us about forgiveness, how the Spiritism doctrine has covered and has not improved, but has clarified some of the benefits, what does it mean, what does not mean to forgive. I believe forgiveness, not there is a scale of easy virtue to develop to hardest virtue to develop, but personal opinion, forgiveness is a challenging one. Is a challenging one that every one of us individually will face its own process, will face its own time, will face its own challenges, and will take its own direction. But as I've been in situations, and I actually, at some point, I went to this lecture that I did back in 2019, because I was going through some things, and I needed to see what was my researching telling me about forgiveness, because I was in a moment that I really needed to figure out something and embark in this forgiveness journey. And I said, if I had to go there, it's just maybe there's an opportunity for, it's here, I think it disconnected. I think there's an opportunity for me to revisit and also share again some of my findings. Let me just connect here. Right.
Please, before you
Yeah.
continue, could you just let me know what is the text number? Living Spring that you have read?
135.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
So some of my references, if you don't know Alberto Almeida, he's such a poet, and he talks a lot about love, and we'll see the relationship between love and forgiveness. So there is a lecture, Free Yourself by Forgiving, or Liberte-se pelo Perdão. There's another one from Divaldo Frango, Psychology with Forgiveness, Psicologia com Perdão, and An Invitation to Forgiveness, Convite ao Perdão, from Lacordaire Abraão and the FEINT, the Federação Espírita do Mato Grosso. Also, as I as I reviewed this, I'm going to use a little bit of, as you might know, I really appreciate all the effort that Artur Valadares does when he brings the gospel. So I use a little bit some of his lecture about forgiveness. But let me just open. What words come to your minds when you say about forgiveness? What comes to mind? Say forgiveness. What comes to your mind?
Compassion.
Compassion.
Letting go.
Letting it go. What else?
Peace.
Peace. Yeah. So we're going to talk about forgiveness, peace, forgiveness, letting it go. Letting it go was a key misunderstanding that I had about letting it go. What does it mean to let it go? And I'm going to use Divaldo Franco's explanation, and also Emmanuel in the Consoler. Emmanuel explains question 340. What does it mean to let it go or to forget? I think that we have a understanding of forgetting, but the forgetting about forgiveness, there's a little nuance about that it really has been helping me in this process. And we're going to talk about forgiveness also as freedom. So stay tuned. What else? So some of the objectives. What does it mean? What are the benefits? There's this tight connection between forgiveness and mistakes. Mistakes that someone else might make, mistakes that we make. And what is this relationship that happens between the one that makes mistakes and the ones that are impacted by the mistakes? And sometimes there are offenses that are directed to us. How are we reacting to those? Just give me a second here. I just want to see my notes. Okay. I want to bring, that was Artur. He brings a text. Oops. She brings a text from a book. I translated Hands Together. It's Mãos Unidas, or maybe a better way, it's Hands United, where Emmanuel mentions about a strange crisis that we are all facing. A crisis that is not in the power of public authorities. A crisis that is not in the power of science, but a crisis that's all within us to resolve. And that crisis is the crisis of intolerance. That crisis that the world is living is about hate. It's about hurt. It's about all that feelings and sentiments and emotions that all of us cultivate, and it starts generating impact into not only in our own lives, but also in the lives of society. A crisis that is even bigger than what we just faced or we have been facing with COVID, economic crisis. So this intolerance has been a fundamental component of this world of trials and expiations that all of us, and I think that's my own opinion, literally every single human being is facing with intolerance and is facing with the challenge that we have when dealing with society. Who here hasn't had a situation where we've been offended? or who here hasn't had a situation that we might have offended someone? In some cases, that case of intolerance really generate huge impacts like wars, crime, violence, and so on. But Emmanuel mentions about a remedy that he calls an antibiotic to all this hatred, intolerance that is available for free, and he calls in the pharmacy of our souls. And you can use that remedy as much as you want, and that is forgiveness. Forgiveness as the remedy to all the challenges and this intolerance and hate that some of us might feel when living in society. And I want to bring this passage where he says that forgiveness is the only mental antibiotic capable of extinguishing the infections of resentment in the organism of the world. Forgiveness between leaders and led, wise and ignorant, teachers and apprentices, benevolence between the thought that governs and the arm that works, between leadership and subalternity. So I thought that was beautiful, the way that Emmanuel described this mental antibiotic. And Arthur goes a little bit beyond and mentions that sometimes when we are with that intolerance, that rigidity, and not pursuing the path of forgiveness, the forgiveness is the vaccine that can prevent us to get that disease. Because sometimes the more that we cultivate this intolerance, hate, will impact our physical body. And one way to prevent that, one way to have that vaccine is the vaccine of forgiveness. So I thought that is poetic and of so much importance for us to be mindful and understand the importance of forgiveness in our life here, incarnated, and through our immortality as immortal spirits. So there are some misconceptions. Let's just talk a little bit about what do we know about forgiveness. There is some misconception that forgive is to collude, or in Portuguese, o perdão se confunde com a conivência. We collude with someone, we just say, yeah, that was wrong, but that's okay. I forgive you, and we don't course correct the direction that might have been wrong. One very clear example where Jesus demonstrated that is not to collude is when we have the passage of the adultery woman. I'm going to talk a little bit about later, but the adultery woman commits adultery. Jesus forgives, encourages her to forgive herself, but he never. At the end, he said, "Goes. You can go, but do not sin anymore." So Jesus does not collude it, does not connive. It was wrong what she did. Encourage to forgive herself, but also to pay attention not to commit the same mistake again. To forgive another's fault, that should not be course corrected, as we just mentioned. Or to forgive is to forget the offense, remove it from our mind. So that was one key point that I appreciated the explanation. Because if something happened to us, someone committed something towards us, an offense or something, it is in our memory, right? There is the letting it go, but however, whatever happened to us, it is there. It's physical, it's biological, it is there. There is a process, there is time that each one of us will take to understand and also to transform whatever that happened to us and shine the light of love into whatever happened to us. What do I mean by shine the light of love? To understand and reframe whatever that memory was into a learning opportunity, into letting and understanding that the other, or even myself, because everything that I do towards others is what I do first with myself, is understanding that moment that happened, whatever that is, as a mistake. And if there was a mistake, myself or someone else was in that ignorant component, was not clear exactly the reasons why he or she committed that. And it's up to us to open the airflows, open the flow to love, to put some light in that situation, and understand that as I'm imperfect, my brother is imperfect, and we're all going to commit mistakes. How am I going to interpret? How am I going throughout my process? Each one of us has our own time to put the layer or the oil of love into that situation, to understand that better, and to take that as a learning opportunity. In addition, Lacordaire mentions and encourages us to think about, there's always the situation, something happens, to separate what happens to the person that made that happen. Why is that important? Are we sons of God? Yes, we are, right? If I committed a mistake or someone else committed a mistake, let's take the example of someone else. Because he or she committed a mistake, he or she is not son of God anymore? No. We both are. Does that mean that I deserve more mercy than the other that committed that mistake? There's no levels of mercy, or we go to the mercy line before incarnation to get more mercy for me. There's the mercy is for all of us. So that encourages us to take a look specifically on that situation. Of course, I'm not saying here to suppress and say, now I forgive. It doesn't happen like this as a switch, and tomorrow I forgave or I completed my forgiveness process. But it shines a light and gives us a perspective that, okay, that was a situation, that other person that committed, or if it's myself, I'm in the process of committing mistakes and ignorance, but we all deserve that that opportunity to course correct, and that opportunity to learn with those mistakes. And that removing it from our mind, it won't happen because it will be there as a learning experience. I just need to resignify, and I need to change whatever that memory caused that into me. There's a philosopher, or I can't remember the name. Oh God, I'm gonna give up. That says that it's not what others do to you, but it's what I do with what others did to me. There's a third layer that I learned. Sometimes what I did with others did to me was not what I wanted to do. Is that it? I don't have any more chances to course correct? So Alberto includes a third layer. Is what I'm going to do, what I already have done with what they did to me. I have always an opportunity. If I did something, I didn't react the way that I wanted, I can course correct. It doesn't say, yeah, you have 365 days to forgive from the moment that the fact happened. There's no rule around that, right? And we might commit mistakes throughout this process of forgiveness. What is the meaning of forgiveness? I'm going to read here. Forgive is to increase our share of love each day. I like to, with a little bit of my business background, nowadays in this crisis, I look at forgiveness and love as a curve of supply and demand. So there is a demand that is rising top to the charts of forgiveness in this environment that we're in. There is a need of that supply of love to catch up in this curve. There is this break even. I think we need to go beyond the break even, and we need to have a surplus of love to meet that curve of forgiveness. Because there's so many situations that we are faced that is inviting us to have our tank, our compartment of love filled and with our reserves, with 2 or 3 or 4 tanks of reserve of love to face the challenges that we are invited to face in this world of trials and expiation. Alberto Almeida brings a psychologist called Tolstoy. Tolstoy reported that when a man forgives, it frees him or herself from internal conflicts and can live a more harmonious life, enjoying it more a peaceful and healthy life. Isn't that true? It's because when you decide, because that's always a decision, when you decide, it's like, I won't forgive, we put ourselves in some sort of a jail. It's not a physical jail, physical space jail, but the jail of hate, the jail of rigidity, the jail of intolerance, the jail of hurt. And that kind of, como fala, corrói, that really sometimes eats you. You cannot move along. You cannot look towards anything else because you are kind of closed in that box, in that thing. And how is that to live a healthy life? So even psychologists are studying this, and has been proved, not that the gospel needs any proof that, or science to prove that that is the truth, but it's so important that science is investigating those components and how that contributes to a better life for all of us. And another addition, if we cultivate those sentiments, how are we going to do all the efforts, everything that is needed for our own moral evolution? If I'm connected to hatred, how is hatred connected to God's wisdom? It doesn't match, it's not aligned. So if we tune ourselves into that jail of hatred, it's automatically denying ourselves the opportunity for us to connect to God, to our guardian angels, to listen to what they can tell us and help us to live a better life. So it's just, we can see by logic, it doesn't work. Again, I'm not saying when the situation happens, those feelings emerge. Why? Because we are humans. Because we are in this process of betterment, of improving. And it's important to recognize, because if we don't recognize the issue, the disease, we're not able to solve. But the problem or the challenge is when we jail ourselves and when we stuck with it, then we close the doors to something better for us. What else? So forgive is not to return the offense to the degree that was directed at us. Sometimes when the law before was If you were hit hard, you give it back harder, right? So that is not what forgiveness means, right? Is sometimes we were gonna be hit hard. Sometimes silence is the best alternative for a moment that we're facing. But nonetheless, returning with the same intense, with the same negative connotation, the negative energy, that is not what forgiveness is. To forgive is also not to discriminate. Forgiveness is not to retaliate. Forgiveness is to keep peace within ourselves. It's tough. It requires a lot of effort when you are, and when you are in that heated, sometimes that heated situation, to keep that inner balance, to keep that peace, it poses a challenge. And it only, as Emmanuel says, it only happens as much as we exercise. We exercise not letting the other to disturb our peace. Because we know that the kingdom is built within us. And it's within us that we have that peace house, that temple inside us, that we build strong walls, that whatever happens to us, we're able to manage that. And when I mention about peace, there's another component when we decide not to take the forgiveness antibiotic or the forgiveness route, because if we let those negative feelings, the hatred, dominate us, we outsource to a third party everything that all our reactions, all our peace, our happiness. We are giving the permission to that third party to do whatever they want for me to feel. I lose control of myself. And that's so true. Because then you let the other person if the other person offends you again letting the other person to disturb your peace. If he or she does another thing, you're letting that other person to control. We lose control of ourselves. And who wants to lose control? We would like to have that control. And then we don't depend. And it's all about a choice. It's all about a choice that each one of us decides to take, depending on where we are in our transformation, right?
May I make a comment?
Yeah.
So when you talk about forgiveness, like, of course, the opposite is like we forgive something bad that has happened to you or to someone. And there are things that are done against us. They're really hard to even think about.
Yeah.
So it's going to be harder to forgive if someone, let's say, killed a loved one, than if someone just said bad words to you. So if we can't yet forgive the bigger things, let's start practicing the smaller things. So then we kind of get used to that feeling of letting go. But it's really not that simple, because sometimes we want to find that peace, we want to find that forgiveness, we want to disconnect from the situation that hurt us, but we still can't, like, because we're not there yet.
Yeah.
But if we start with the smaller things, someone called me names when I'm walking, or my son responded in an offensive way to me, or whatever. Mm-hmm. It's easier to start that forgiveness process with the smaller things. Yeah. And then hopefully with effort and knowing yourself, you'll be able to, because a lot of times it's like, oh, I forgave someone, but don't step on my toes again. Yeah. Don't come near. So it's not really forgiveness, right?
Is that a true forgiveness? Exactly.
It's really not.
Yeah. And I'm gonna, if I have time, I will talk. There's Sometimes we just say forgiveness, da boca para fora, like from just our mouth to outside, but it's all here. And we might think that, say, yeah, I forgave. But our conscience knows exactly, and God knows everything that happens with us. We don't need to try to deceive anyone. It's only, we have this commitment, not to anyone else, but to our own self.
I like very much that analogy that you brought about the cage.
Mm-hmm.
And I was just visualizing that, and what come up to my mind was that we are not there by ourselves in that cage. We have the other person that offended us together there with us.
Yeah.
Constantly.
Yeah.
So we get this chain connecting us, and it's a negative feeling. It's a negative chain. And to reach the peace is not possible if you keep sending that bad feelings. Yeah.
What are you connecting to, right?
Exactly.
What's your tune? What are you aligned with? It's interesting because it's so real, it's logic, but at the same time, when we are facing whatever we're facing, it is tough. It is, and there are as you just mentioned, Anna, there might be situations that is a little bit easier, right?
For sure.
It's just like call me names, or maybe there is someone that told you that. It's not someone that is that close, so it's easier. But there might be situation that someone that is your family. It's someone that's really close to you. It's tied to you. The impact it's bigger and will require more and more effort and time. And that's one thing that if I didn't learn anything about this, one thing that was clear to me, and we know that the Spiritism never gives you a checklist. You do 5 things and then you get your happiness. Or when you face the situation, this is the process. You take those 7 steps and you're going to figure it out. It's not like this. There's no rituals. It tells what happens, and each one of us takes our own direction, whatever that works for us. And the time is something that is so true that each one of us will have our own time, because each one of us, we are in a place of our evolution scale or evolution timeline. Some people have gone through so many situations that is kind of easier. That person might know the mechanisms, what triggers him or her, what does not trigger him or her. That takes a little bit of more time. But others, depending on the situation, it's new. They will make mistakes, won't know what to do. It might, in some cases, not practice the true forgiveness. Instead of when you receive the offense, you go even harder. That might occur. But the importance is to be aware. I think that is the first step, to be aware. I did something, was not the right thing. That's not what I've learned in what Jesus has told us. And didn't Jesus cover forgiveness in almost every passage? Everything that Jesus, when he talked about, there was a forgiveness component to it. That's why he said, you shall forgive 70 times 7. Does that mean that we are going to forgive 490 times? We keep counting. We have in our bedroom, 1, 2, 3. When I got to 490, I'm done. No more forgiveness. No, you're invited to forgive as many times as it is required.
Each offense.
Maybe it's each. Yeah, exactly. Each offense is 490. Exactly. Yeah.
I like what Lacroix there says. He says, when Jesus told that to Peter, what does he mean? He said, Peter, go and practice. practice. It's a virtue, and virtue needs to be practiced.
Exactly. And I like Emmanuel because of that. He's so keen in practicing. It's like you won't get to a change habit if you don't practice, if you don't do your part.
I just remember a while ago when we were just joking around the retirement topic.
There's, I always remember
I always remember, like,
I want my spiritual retirement. By 60, I covered all my trials and expiations, and I just relax.
Yeah. You just forgive until you're 60. You just like put in your savings account, and then you go and you retire.
Exactly.
So it's just like always keeps coming back to my mind. There is no retirement in the spiritual learning.
There's none whatsoever.
You can't practice and master that.
Yeah, the trials and the expiations will go from birth to death, the body, and then we'll continue depending of our accomplishments and what we have. Each one knows what we have to figure it out, and that's why we have the law of reincarnation as well. Can you imagine if that was the only chance, like holy moly, to figure everything out in just one take? That is why we have the law of reincarnation, to give us that opportunity, right? To course correct and to change. And because of that law of incarnation, as you mentioned, Anna, there are some times that there's some like tough ones, like killing someone, right? Taking the life of someone or doing something very drastic. We have this desire, this mindset, like that person shall pay, that something needs to happen. I'm not saying that it doesn't need to happen, but sometimes we take God's role to punish and to give it back to that person at the same level. For example, if someone killed someone else, that person will be killed again. Can you imagine if that was the way, right? I was killed this incarnation, next incarnation, I killed that person. The other incarnation, that person killed me again. We have this vicious cycle that never ends. Never, never, never ends. There's always a victim, and there will be always someone that committed a mistake. So what is the invitation for us to take a look? And even though it's so hard to maybe seeing someone that was not punished enough by the human laws because he or she committed something, there is always God's justice that never fails. What is one example that never fails? Divaldo mentioned, for us to trust, don't give back the same way, be the prosecutor, be the judge, and figure it out, that situation by ourselves. There is the law of cause and effect, right? The person will, we're not being connivente, we're not conniving with that person, but there are mechanisms like diseases, challenges that person might face. I'm not saying that even that we need to wish that thing, but we just need to trust for every action there is a reaction. And it's not for us to be the judge. What is the reaction? What is the impact that person shall have? It's up to God's law and the universal laws to do that. Otherwise, we will never end. This circle will never end. This planet will never transition to a better state of regeneration. And Arthur says, kudos. And we should look at those examples of those people that even with the most horrendous and tragic crimes that those people might face, that allows forgiveness to be the medicine, to be the vaccine, because it requires a lot of work, and that mindset will help the person and the world to be a better place and break this vicious cycle of us being the judge. And we know that not even us are the judges of ourselves. We are the judges of ourselves, but it's our conscience that will tell us, okay, Luis, you did what you were supposed to do, or this is something that you need to do it better. It's myself figuring out. And everything that I'm saying towards the other, but mainly and more important, towards our own self. Because what happens? If I am that way, if I am that rigid, if I am that person that does not allow love to be the medicine and forgiveness to be that antibiotic, am I towards others? Am I going to do that with myself? No. Because as the text said, it's just the others that commit mistakes. Didn't we hurt someone along the ways? Didn't we commit some mistakes along the ways with others? And if we were in that jail, we're in that jail with ourselves as well. And that will be harder. And without that self-forgiveness, there's one piece of guilt that really impacts us, that really gets us stuck and does not allow us to move forward. There's one passage from Joana de Anjos that says, the medication, I like this analogy of Emmanuel, Joana de Angelis, all about medicine and pharmacy, antibiotics and vaccine, saying that the medication we apply in our neighbor's wound is the medication we apply in our own soul.
Getting to this point, about the idea of the extreme change that forgiveness can lead to. You might have heard of it a few years ago. There was a court case where a man had his son killed by a group of kids that ultimately they just wanted to rob him, and they ended up killing him. They caught one of them, and he ended up in court. And oftentimes in court, victims are allowed to make statements as part of the process.
Mm-hmm.
And the father went up and he said, I forgive you, and not only do I forgive you, but all I feel towards you is a deep sense of empathy and compassion as to what you must have been going through to get to a place where you felt that was something you wanted to do. Yeah. And to this idea that you raised, Luis, that's exceptional about the ability to transform. I mean, they asked him afterwards why he would do that, and he said he was a very devout Muslim, and he said one of the tenets of Islam is the oneness of God and oneness of all creation. And so in effect, that young man is as much a child of God as my child is. Yeah. And my child is now again with God, and that this child, and I think he even said this, is like my child now, still here, and still present, still existing, deserving of empathy and compassion and care. And if I were to really want to expose that sentiment to my own children, then I would have to expose it to all of God's children all the same. And it was just such a powerful, and it brought the entire court to tears, the judge to tears. I think she had to take a break afterwards, and to this idea of transformation, that it wasn't even their forgiveness, yet it impacted them so much. I mean, it impacted me so much. I'm talking about it I think this was like 5 years ago now. But it's the power that it can have in terms of just absolutely drastically changing the interaction, and this idea of supreme justice. Of course it always applies, yet it allows the entirety of God's realm of existence to move forward in ways that without it would be just so partial and so empty and so lacking. So anyway, just
taking that example, can you imagine that father?
And then he hugs the guy, right?
Then he hugs the guy at the end.
I remember.
Then he hugs the guy at the end. You're right.
Imagine first how hard that is, but imagine not taking that route. Imagine the severity of that jail that he would be.
Yeah.
living day by day with that. That I can't even imagine that. Divaldo tells a strong story. In short, he starts his lecture about forgiveness about a story, a war that happened between Turkey and Armenia. There was a Turkey soldier that invaded a house with parents and 2 girls. They killed the parents, cold blood. They killed one of the sisters in front of her and took the other sister as a sexual slave. Can you imagine? That itself is already so drastic. That girl, I think when she reached 17 years old, she was able to escape from the jail that she was in. She moved back to Turkey. She went to nurse's school. She became a nurse, an exemplary nurse. At some point, the owner of the hospital came to her because there was a case of a guy that was about to, the chances of him to leave was minimum or almost to 0. He had a skin condition, and not even the family wanted to take care of him. And he asked, "Would you like?"
And just really gross. And
yeah, it was something really hard that he was by himself. And the hospital manager came to her and said, "Would you take care of that man?" And she said, "Yeah, I will take care of him." And she gave everything that she could, everything. She lost weight, and the man survived. The man, when he came to the hospital to thank the hospital management, and the manager said, "You don't need to thank me. You had to thank that nurse." So then he went to thank that nurse. And as the nurse started talking, he noticed an Armenian accent. And he said, "Oh, I've been in Armenia. It seems that you have an Armenian accent." And yes, I am from Armenia. And I know you. You killed my parents. You killed my sister. And the guy was in shock. It's he did all of that. And he asked, "How come? How come you helped me? Why didn't you let me die?" Because for everything that he did. And she said, "The God that I know teaches me to return everything with love and not to return in the same coin." So that was when I heard that story. Can you imagine the psychological impact of that woman for everything that she went through, especially when we talk about sexual harassment and everything. It's a deep wound to have. And she did that. She dedicated herself to that man, right? So similar to that story, I think it's all possible, right? And each one of us will know our level of comfort, our level of evolution. But I think the importance is to choose that route of forgiveness. I'm choosing that. I'm not be there yet. I am in that process. I'm sometimes I am in the jail. Sometimes I'm able to escape. I go on a parole. But sometimes I'm back. So there is that back and forth that is part of this process. But I think the importance is awareness and decide to use forgiveness as the key to free our own selves first, and to cultivate that peace, and to take ownership of that peace within our own selves, and not let how many other people, or even ourselves, to dictate how we should behave and how we should feel and how we should cultivate those emotions. I am the one that should decide that. I should not outsource that to a third party. Anyone else. It's just me. And I think and it will take time. It's not the flip of a switch at all. And each one, sometimes you say, sometimes two people might be in the same situation, the same offense or the same challenge. People A might be there already. Saying, yeah, I am maybe 75% forgive in the forgiveness journey. I'm not. Maybe I'm 20, I'm 25. And that's okay. Because everyone has our own pace and our own time. So I think that's my final message, is to use that key, to use the knowledge, use this antibiotic, use this vaccine of forgiveness, and allows us to have that flow of love. Let's build our tanks of love, because in this world of crisis, in this world of intolerance, hate, there's a word for magua. I don't know how to say magua in English. I think maybe it's just hurt. But that really gets into our engine and does not let us move forward, does not let us to really accomplish what God has for us to accomplish. And for everything that happens, to have that mindset, that lens, to reframe it, to rephrase it, and just put the light into it, because there is a learning opportunity for that. And each one of us will know what that learning opportunity is. Yeah, so forgiveness is the essential ingredient for our own peace. Thank you.
Thank you.
In that same situation that Adler was talking about, like I have seen that video more than once, and it's really impactful. He had that faith. It was true. Like we could see he was talking truly. He was not just saying the words, right? How many people he has impacted with that
Message.
Yeah.
that message? And it's in YouTube. Like how many more people are going to be impacted? Again, it helps us to be free, but it might help someone else to start thinking about. And again, the person that committed a crime, he will still pay, let's say, per se, what. But if he was not have lived that situation with the forgiveness from the Father, maybe he would still have other feelings inside of him and trying to justify his acts with this and that. But at that moment, it would be a change moment for him too, right? It is a almost impossible situation to think about, like as a mother, like to think like how, and it takes courage and takes humbleness too, because a lot of people, and I didn't read the comments, but a lot of them think, how come I will never forgive someone, this my son, oh he's, what is the word I say, like he's demeaning his son's life because he forgave someone who did that, like, it's not about that, right? Like his son is not there, like physically, but he really believes his son's lives on, and that's, I don't know, that's a very I thought about that when you're talking. We're like, it's such an extreme example, but it's so powerful.
And if we take what the gospel according to Spiritism say, right in the middle, right? There's no salvation outside charity. And we know that forgiveness is one component of charity, right? It's our benevolence, our indulgence, and forgiveness. It's a true practice of charity. And we know it wasn't by chance that we start with benevolence, indulgence, and forgiveness as a scale. The forgiveness one is one that is, it requires a lot of work. It requires a lot of work.
Works of more work of other virtues too.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
I always think like you have to be practicing humbleness to accept, not feel offended. I mean, we still may have the feeling, but to let it go, because it's almost like, how dare someone is telling me this? How dare like someone is using these words? So it's part of your our like pride that also kind of like,
Yeah.
because again, there's a scale of situations, right?
Yeah.
From like someone calling you names to someone doing something really harmful physically to you or to someone. But in that scale, like you can always like know in yourself, why do I feel so offended by someone calling me names?
Yeah.
And like, I don't know, that's, for me, it just like helps me develop a little bit, tiny bit,
Step
so
by
maybe
step.
when something a little bit bigger happens, I'm
Yeah.
not like so defensive all the time.
Yeah.
To that point, it's and actually, if anyone's interested, they have Disney Plus. The Story of God with Morgan Freeman actually interviews this guy
Oh,
for like
yeah.
a lot longer. Like, and so there's a long conversation with him where you
okay.
get to like really understand. It's very powerful. If any of you haven't and are interested, I recommend you watch it. The point though, just building on what you're saying, Anna, is that when we have that ability to forgive, it can then open us up, like this example of this man, to so many other of God's glorious virtues, the ability to appreciate just wondrous compassion and wondrous great gratitude, appreciation, and even consolation and benevolence. And in this particular man's case, he said, you know, one thing that and he even said this, I'm actually grateful. And they said, how can you be grateful about this experience? He says, because, and I'm paraphrasing now for sure, but in the Muslim faith, when somebody dies a violent death, it's actually a problem because the way they understand the soul, there's a ritual that typically needs to occur in order for the soul to be able to pass on to heaven, to God, to return to the oneness. And typically that is opportunities taken away in violent deaths because of the circumstances around the death and also the way that the body is typically dealt with. He said, you know something, he said, a witness came up to me and said to me, because this ritual is relatively quick, but again, oftentimes it's lost in times of death. He said, she described my son as if he was putting his finger up to God, and apparently this is the ritual. It's somebody essentially looking up and committing their soul to God. I give myself back to you, O Lord. And he said, the fact that this witness shared that to him, he knew that his son still had enough breath left in him to commit his soul over back to God. And so the ritual had completed itself. And he was extremely grateful through that experience to have been able to have this shared with him, which he considered to be, again, just the great benevolence of the Almighty in this witness, seeing the only thing that the witness saw was this ritual before this his son passed away. And so he said, these are the emotions, because he was able to forgive to that extent, this is all he's left with. He's only left with this grateful reassurance of the sublimity of his son's existence in the hands of God, and in the fact that he is now returned to him in the fullness of the Islamic tradition. And it's when you put yourself in that cage, like you were saying, Luis, you rob yourself of the ability to experience these things, because all you see to the word, you're blinded only by the hate, and you can't see all the other wondrousness that this allows. Because at the end of the day, the truth is, death is just, as Spiritism and many other faiths say, is just a step, is just a doorway to the real existence. And so we are just cycling in and out of it. And so that weight that we attach to it is ours. And by these types of by being able to appreciate these types of sentiments, we can release that and experience the rest of it. So
I was thinking about other things when you guys were talking, about as a society how far behind we are, and then that brings me to a lecture that I was listening not long ago from Haroldo Dutra Lima. He was talking about how we were before, olho por olho, dente por dente, and how this was somehow an evolution. Because, for example, if you come and you hurt my spouse, I would go and kill your whole family. So that was one step forward. But then when we think now, and you were talking about that, I was thinking that really impacted me. I was only a teenager, and there was the Oklahoma bomb that killed several people, and then the guy was convicted to death. And families were fighting over the possibility to sit there and see that guy being killed. And we think about a state, like a government, killing someone else because that person did harm.
Yeah.
And then we go back to all that and think about do no harm should be the first and foremost principle. And we are still doing harm.
Yeah.
I just sharing a little bit, I have a client, long story short, he was into construction and he hurt himself. And he cannot go back to that industry. And then after several sessions, he told me, like, I can actually not even work because I committed a crime, and construction is the only place that you're kind of pardoned.
Mm.
Like, having a record is not a problem. Like, you paid for your price, he went to jail, that was my very, like, I remember I was even judgmental when he told me he went to jail. And then after a few sessions, I was like, oh my gosh, this is someone that's not that different from me. He just made one bad choice.
Yep.
And it was like he was caught with drugs and stuff. And then now he's really trying hard to put his life together, and the depression and everything comes from there because, like, as a society, we don't forgive. And he's trying.
Still
and then
some
I'm
work
just
to do.
thinking, like, what is the outcome from it? He could build an identity and he could do something with his life construction. Now he had like a big back injury and he cannot go back to school to become a realtor or other things he was thinking because no body will give him a license because of that crime that he committed a long time ago.
Yeah.
So yeah.
So I think
just
there's a
thinking
strong.
that there is a lot to
change. Yeah. But I like that we have changed a lot, but there is more that needs to be done. Absolutely, for sure. And as it starts with every single one of us. As Jesus told to Bartholomew, the gospel is not for the masses, right? It's for each one of us. And as each one of us changes, that starts replicating. So more people need to change, absolutely. But let's be faithful that we'll get there.
And do our part.
Yeah, and do our part. Yeah. All right. Let's go to our. Thank you very much. Thank you for sharing. That was great. So connected that we are to our God, to the divine wisdom, to our Master Jesus that gave so much information, that gave so much examples on how and the importance to practice forgiveness. Let's raise our thoughts to our guardian angels. Let us be connected and let us be aware to establish that connection to the good, to God, to Jesus, every single moment of our daily lives. So we can take the opportunity of receiving information, receiving guidance, receiving the love that's infinite from God and Jesus and our guardian angels that help us to navigate so many of the challenges that we face in this world that is in crisis, this world that is facing so many of those struggles that we know it is for a reason, and we believe and we have hope that we have the best outcome into our future. Let's ask that we have another blessed week, a week of serenity, a week of love, a week of indulgence, a week of compassion and empathy. And let us be aware of all those small to big moments that something come to us as an offense, or if we direct an offense to someone, that we can stop, think about it, and consciously choose this antibiotic of forgiveness that is freely available in our soul. So be it.